Blood dripped from Marcus Washington's knuckles as he stood over two unconscious white officers in his living room. Sirens wailed in the distance. His military training had saved his life tonight, but as a black man in Oak Ridge, he knew this was just the beginning. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you want to see more stories of justice being served, hit that like button and subscribe right now. What would you do if officers illegally broke into your home? Let's find out what happened next. Marcus Washington adjusted to his new life in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the same discipline that had carried him through 20 years of distinguished military service. At 42, the retired Delta Force commander had hoped to find peace in this small town, away from the chaos and violence that had defined his career. Every morning he rose before dawn, lacing up his running shoes and hitting the quiet streets while most residents still slept. His 6'2" frame moved with purpose, each stride powerful, yet controlled, just like everything else in his meticulously ordered life. The early runs served two purposes: maintaining the physical conditioning that had become second nature during his military career, and avoiding the stares and whispers that followed him as one of the few black residents in this predominantly white community. Despite his attempts to blend in, Marcus couldn't escape the daily microaggressions. The way store clerks watched him a little too closely. How white women clutched their purses tighter when he passed. The unnecessary police patrols that seemed to materialize whenever he ventured downtown. Today marked 6 months since he'd purchased his modest two-bedroom home on Sycamore Street, a place he'd chosen for its privacy and distance from neighbors. Few people in Oak Ridge knew about his military background, and he preferred it that way. His home revealed little about his past to casual observers, but contained hidden security measures that would impress military contractors: reinforced doors, specialized locks, motion sensors, and a sophisticated camera system that recorded everything within 50 yards of his property. Behind a false wall in his study, Marcus maintained a small room housing his military memorabilia, tactical equipment, and a gun safe containing legally registered firearms. This hidden space served as both a sanctuary and a reminder of the man he had been, the lives he had taken, and the brothers in arms he had lost. 3 afternoons a week, Marcus volunteered at the community center, mentoring at-risk youth. Many of these kids, especially the Black and Latino ones, reminded him of himself growing up in South Philadelphia, where joining the military had been his escape from the violence and poverty that claimed many of his childhood friends. "Control what you can control," he told 17-year-old Darius during today's session, helping the teenager perfect his form on the bench press. "Your body, your mind, your reactions. That's all you. Everything else is just noise." Darius nodded, adding, "Like when Officer Brennan stopped me yesterday for no reason. That was the 3rd time this month." Marcus's expression remained neutral, but inside anger flickered. He'd been hearing similar stories from other black residents in recent weeks. Officer Michael Brennan and his partner Officer Thomas Cavanaugh had developed a reputation for targeting minorities, particularly in the predominantly black east side of town. "Document everything," Marcus advised quietly. "Time, place, what was said, and always stay calm. Getting angry gives them power over you." As he walked home that evening, Marcus witnessed firsthand what Darius had described. Across the street, Brennan and Cavanaugh had a young black man pressed against their patrol car. Even from a distance, Marcus could see no justification for the aggressive treatment. The teenager, hands behind his back, wasn't resisting. Yet Cavanaugh twisted his arm unnecessarily. Drawing on years of tactical assessment, Marcus crossed the street. "Evening, officers," he said, his voice steady and non-threatening. "Everything all right here?" Officer Brennan, a stocky man with a ruddy face and close-cropped blonde hair, turned with obvious annoyance. "This doesn't concern you, sir. Please move along." The teenager, who Marcus now recognized as Jamal Washington, no relation but a regular at the community center, looked at him with pleading eyes. "I didn't do nothing, Mr. Washington. I was just walking home." Kavanaugh, taller and leaner than his partner, with cold blue eyes that reminded Marcus of a particularly sadistic lieutenant he'd served with in Afghanistan, tightened his grip on Jamal's arm, causing the boy to wince. "I said move along," Brennan repeated, hand resting on his holster in a not-so-subtle threat. "Unless you want to join him downtown for obstructing police business." Marcus stood his ground, maintaining a non-threatening posture while ensuring his phone was recording the encounter. "I'm just concerned about a member of our community. What's he being detained for?" Kavanaugh's face hardened. "Mind your business before you get yourself in trouble." The threat hung in the air between them. After ensuring Jamal had suffered no serious injury, Marcus reluctantly stepped back, knowing that escalating the situation would only make things worse. He watched as they put Jamal in the back of the patrol car, noting the time, location, and officers' badge numbers. That night, the first strange call came. When Marcus answered, there was only silence, then a click. The second call came 30 minutes later again, with no one speaking. Around midnight, an unmarked police cruiser drove slowly past his house. Then again at 2 a.m. The message was clear: he had been noticed. The next morning, Marcus added 2 more cameras to his security system and checked his emergency go bag, a habit from his military days. It contained cash, a burner phone, first aid supplies, and other essentials for a quick departure. Years of combat had taught him to recognize the gathering storm clouds of trouble, and all his instincts were now on high alert. The evening before everything changed, Marcus had dinner with Dr. Thong. Alicia Thompson, one of the few people in town he considered a friend. As the only black surgeon at Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital, she understood his experiences in ways others couldn't. They had met when Marcus brought in a teenager who had collapsed during a community center basketball game, and they had developed a cautious friendship over the past few months. "I've been hearing things," Alicia said as they finished their meal at her small but elegantly furnished apartment, "about Brennan and Kavanaugh. They're not just harassing people, Marcus. There are rumors about evidence planting missing money from drug busts." Marcus nodded, unsurprised. "I've been watching them. Yesterday was the 3rd time I've seen them stop someone without cause." Alicia leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Be careful. Chief Harrison protects his own, and there's something wrong in that department. The hospital sees the results, people coming in with injuries from resisting arrest when they were clearly beaten while handcuffed." As Marcus drove home, he noticed the same unmarked police car parked a block from his house. Instead of pulling into his driveway, he circled the neighborhood twice, noting the car following at a distance. Whatever was coming, it would be soon. That night he didn't undress for bed, instead sitting in his darkened living room waiting. The storm was about to break. Officers Brennan and Kavanaugh sat in their unmarked cruiser 2 blocks from Marcus Washington's house, going over their plan one final time. "You sure about this tip?" Brennan asked nervously, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. "That black guy at the community center is dealing—" Kavanaugh snorted, checking his watch. 2 a.m. Perfect time for their operation. "Does it matter Harrison wants him gone after he started asking questions about our arrests? The confidential informant angle gives us coverage to search, and if we happen to find something, all the better." What Kavanaugh didn't mention was the envelope of cocaine in his pocket, ready to be discovered in Washington's home. "Remember," Kavanaugh continued, "we go in quiet, find something incriminating, then make the arrest. If anything goes wrong, we stick to the story that we had reliable information about drug activity." Brennan nodded, though his heart wasn't in it. He'd joined the force to make a difference, but somewhere along the way, Kavanaugh's influence and the department's culture had corrupted him. Still, it was too late to back out now. They approached Marcus's house from the rear, using flashlights sparingly. Kavanaugh had a slim gym to force the back door, having disabled what they thought was the only security camera earlier that day. Inside his home, Marcus sat motionless in his hidden room, watching multiple monitor screens as the officers approached. His military training had taught him to prepare for all contingencies, and the comprehensive security system he'd installed was far more sophisticated than the officers realized. Every angle of his property was covered by cameras, their feeds recording to both local storage and a secure cloud server. He watched calmly as Kavanaugh skillfully manipulated the lock on his back door. When the officers entered his kitchen, Marcus remained still, controlling his breathing as he'd done during countless high-stakes operations. Let them show their hand first. Brennan and Kavanaugh moved through the darkened house with flashlights, searching methodically. "Check the bedroom first," Kavanaugh whispered. "That's where these guys usually keep cash or drugs." Marcus could hear them clearly through the hidden microphones placed throughout his home. He watched as they entered his bedroom, Kavanaugh immediately going to the dresser while Brennan checked under the mattress. "Look at this," Brennan said, holding up an envelope he'd found in the nightstand. Inside was $800 in cash, Marcus's emergency money. Without hesitation, Kavanaugh pocketed it. "He won't report it missing," he smirked. They continued searching, becoming increasingly frustrated as they found nothing incriminating. "Plant it in the bathroom," Brennan suggested, referring to the cocaine Kavanaugh had brought. "Under the sink, make it look hidden." As they moved toward the bathroom, Kavanaugh paused at the small display of framed photographs on the living room wall. Using his flashlight, he examined one showing Marcus in military uniform, surrounded by other soldiers in an Afghan landscape. "Wait," he said, his voice suddenly uncertain. "This guy was military." He moved to another photo, this one showing Marcus receiving a medal from a general. "Shit, Brennan, look at this." Brennan joined him, squinting at the image. "Special Forces," he muttered, recognizing the insignia. "Delta Force, actually," came a calm voice from behind them. Both officers whirled around, drawing their weapons in a single fluid motion. Marcus Washington stood in the doorway of what they had assumed was a closet, his powerful frame silhouetted against the darkness. Unlike the panicked homeowner they had expected to surprise in bed, he was fully dressed and completely composed. "Gentlemen," Marcus continued, his voice level and controlled, "I believe you're in my home without a warrant. I'd like to see your identification, please." Brennan froze his gun, wavering slightly. Kavanaugh, however, recovered quickly. "Police don't move," he shouted, as if they were the ones who had been surprised. "We received information about drug activity at this address." Marcus didn't flinch. "I'm aware of who you are. Officers Brennan and Kavanaugh. What I asked for was your warrant." His eyes flicked to the bulge in Kavanaugh's pocket where he'd stashed the stolen cash. "And I'd appreciate the return of my property." Brennan's face paled. This was not going according to plan. The calm, articulate black man before them was nothing like the drug dealer they'd expected to intimidate. Kavanaugh, sensing their control of the situation slipping, made a fatal error. "Shut up and get on the ground now," he demanded, advancing with his baton suddenly in his free hand. What happened next occurred with such speed that later Brennan would have difficulty recounting it accurately. Marcus moved like liquid lightning, his body responding with trained precision, honed through thousands of combat situations. In one motion, he disarmed Kavanaugh, twisting the baton away and simultaneously sweeping the officer's legs from under him. Kavanaugh crashed to the floor with a startled cry. Brennan fired a panicked shot that went wide, embedding itself in the wall. Before he could squeeze the trigger again, Marcus had crossed the distance between them and struck with precision a knife-hand blow to Brennan's wrist that sent the gun clattering to the floor. The officer threw a wild punch that Marcus easily deflected, responding with a controlled strike to Brennan's solar plexus that left him gasping for air. Kavanaugh had regained his feet and charged police training no match for the lethal efficiency of a Delta Force operator. Marcus sidestepped, used Kavanaugh's momentum against him, and delivered a precise strike to the base of his skull. The officer collapsed unconscious before he hit the floor. Brennan, still struggling for breath, reached for his backup weapon, but Marcus was faster, delivering a final blow that sent the second officer into unconsciousness. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 20 seconds. Marcus stood over the fallen officers, his breathing only slightly elevated. Blood from a small cut on his knuckle dripped onto the hardwood floor, the only evidence that he had exerted himself at all. In the distance, sirens wailed. Someone, likely a neighbor, had heard the gunshot and called 911. Marcus knew he had only minutes before more officers arrived. He quickly secured both unconscious men with their own handcuffs, then retrieved his phone and dialed emergency services himself. "This is Marcus Washington at 720 Sycamore Street," he reported calmly. "Two men broke into my home identifying themselves as police officers. They were not in uniform and presented no warrant. I defended myself, and they are now restrained. I believe one of them fired a weapon during the altercation." The dispatcher assured him officers were already en route. Marcus ended the call and quickly gathered the evidence: the security footage, the bullet in the wall, the cocaine Kavanaugh had brought to plant. He downloaded the security videos to a secure cloud server, ensuring the evidence couldn't be destroyed. Through his security cameras, Marcus watched as two patrol cars pulled up outside, lights flashing. He recognized both officers emerging from the vehicles: Reeves and Donovan, both known associates of Brennan and Kavanaugh. The odds of receiving fair treatment had just dropped to 0. "Shit," he muttered, making a split-second decision. He grabbed his go bag from the hidden room, pocketed the thumb drive containing copies of the security footage, and moved swiftly to the rear of the house. Years of operating in hostile territory had taught him to always have an escape route. In his case, it was a crawlspace access in his garage that led to a drainage ditch running behind several properties. By the time officers Reeves and Donovan broke down his front door shouting his name, Marcus Washington was already moving through the darkness, a ghost in the night, his mind racing through contingency plans. Behind him in his violated home, the consequences of this night's events were just beginning to unfold. As he moved silently through the sleeping neighborhood, Marcus knew his life in Oak Ridge had just been irrevocably shattered. Police Chief Richard Harrison slammed his fist on the desk, his face flushed with barely contained rage. The early morning emergency meeting of Oak Ridge's police leadership had been underway for 20 minutes, and his anger had only intensified with each passing moment. "Let me get this straight," he growled, glaring at officers Reeves and Donovan. "You're telling me that this civilian, this black man, assaulted two of my officers during a legitimate search and then disappeared?" Officer Reeves shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, sir. When we arrived, officers Brennan and Kavanaugh were unconscious and handcuffed with their own cuffs. Washington was gone." Chief Harrison was a barrel-chested man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual scowl that had deepened over his 30 years on the force. He'd built the Oak Ridge Police Department into what he considered a model of efficiency, though his methods had raised eyebrows at the state level more than once. And what exactly were Brennan and Kavanaugh doing at Washington's house at 2 in the morning, in plain clothes in an unmarked car? They had information from a confidential informant about drug activity, Officer Donovan offered. They were conducting a preliminary investigation. Harrison wasn't stupid. He knew Brennan and Kavanaugh operated in gray areas, but they were effective at keeping certain neighborhoods in line, and that was what mattered to him. Now, with both officers in the hospital, one with a concussion and the other with 3 broken ribs, he had a potential public relations nightmare on his hands. "This is how we're playing it," he announced, standing up and pacing the room. "Washington is a fugitive who violently assaulted 2 officers in the line of duty. I want an APB out now. Every available officer is on this. I want him found before the end of the day." He pointed to the department's public information officer. "Draft a press release. Make Washington sound as dangerous as possible. Military background, violent assault on police, the works. I want the public afraid of this man." By noon, local news stations were broadcasting Marcus Washington's military ID photo with the caption, "Dangerous fugitive wanted for assaulting police officers." The narrative had been carefully crafted. 2 dedicated officers, following up on community drug concerns, had been viciously attacked by Washington, who was now armed and dangerous. No mention was made of the late-night timing, the lack of a warrant, or the fact that the officers were in plain clothes. Dr. Alicia Thompson was in the middle of her hospital rounds when she saw the news bulletin on the break-room television. Her coffee cup nearly slipped from her fingers as she stared at Marcus's photo on the screen. "That's impossible," she whispered to herself. She knew Marcus, his character, his discipline. The story being reported made no sense. Immediately, she tried calling his cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Her text messages remained undelivered. Marcus was 15 miles outside of Oak Ridge, holed up in an abandoned hunting cabin that belonged to James Farrell, a former Army Ranger he'd served with in Iraq. James had moved to California years ago, but had kept the property as an investment. He'd given Marcus the key when he first moved to Oak Ridge, saying, "Just in case you need to disappear for a while." It was off the grid with no electricity or running water, making it invisible to the usual methods of surveillance. Inside the sparse cabin, Marcus sat at a rickety table reviewing the security footage on his laptop. The battery was at 70%, and he was rationing its use. The footage was damning. It clearly showed Brennan and Kavanaugh breaking into his home, stealing his money, and planning to plant evidence. It also showed the unprovoked attack when he had simply identified himself as the homeowner. What it didn't show was what had happened after the officers were unconscious when he had called 911 himself. That part of the recording had been conveniently omitted from the police report, according to the news coverage he'd picked up on his battery-powered radio. As he reviewed the footage, memories flooded back of similar situations during his military career, times when his authority had been questioned despite his rank, when white soldiers of lesser rank had been automatically deferred to instead of him. 20 years of exemplary service hadn't shielded him from the reality of being a black man in America, even in the supposedly meritocratic military. He remembered a mission in Kandahar when he'd saved his entire unit by identifying a disguised Taliban fighter that others had missed. Later at the debriefing, the colonel had asked another team member to verify his account, as if his word alone wasn't enough. He remembered the promotions that had come slower than for his white counterparts, the constant need to be twice as good, twice as disciplined, twice as perfect. And now here he was, a decorated veteran with multiple commendations for valor, hiding in a cabin while being portrayed as a criminal for defending his own home. Across town, Officer Elena Rodriguez sat at her desk reviewing the reports from the Washington incident with growing concern. As one of the few Latina officers in the department, she had always been careful to do everything by the book, knowing that any mistake would be magnified because of her background. Something about this case didn't add up. Why would two experienced officers conduct a drug search at 2 a.m. without backup? Why were they in plain clothes? And why hadn't they called for support until after they were allegedly assaulted? She pulled up Marcus Washington's record on her computer. No criminal history, distinguished military career, volunteer work at the community center, owner of his home. It didn't fit the profile of a drug dealer, and it certainly didn't match the narrative that Chief Harrison was pushing. Her thoughts were interrupted by her partner, Officer Wilson, dropping a stack of flyers on her desk. "Hot off the press," he said. "Chief wants these distributed everywhere. Gas stations, grocery stores, you name it." The flyer showed Marcus's photo with the word "Wanted" in bold red letters above it. "Armed and extremely dangerous," she read aloud, frowning. "But there's no evidence he's armed. He left his legally registered firearms at his home." Wilson shrugged. "Chief's orders. Says Washington has military training, so he's dangerous with or without a gun." As Wilson walked away, Rodriguez slipped one of the flyers into her bag. She had some research to do off the clock. Marcus was just considering his next move when his burner phone, one of 3 he'd purchased with cash at different convenience stores across the county over the past 6 months, vibrated with a text. It was from a number he recognized, Colonel James Wilson, his former Delta Force commander. "Secure line, call now." Stepping outside to ensure better reception, Marcus dialed the number. Wilson answered on the first ring. "Washington, what the hell is going on? I'm seeing reports about you attacking police officers." Quickly and efficiently, Marcus briefed his former commander on the situation. Wilson listened without interruption, then said, "Send me the footage. I have contacts in the FBI Civil Rights Division. This sounds like a clear violation. In the meantime, stay hidden. These small-town departments can be more dangerous than any insurgents we faced overseas when they close ranks." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, the military response automatic even years after his retirement. "I've got maybe 72 hours in this location before I need to move. Water and supplies are limited." "I'll have someone you can trust make contact within 48 hours, Wilson promised. "Just like Mosul Marcus. Survive, evade, resist, escape. You've done it before in worse conditions." Back at the Oak Ridge Police Department, Chief Harrison was addressing the expanded search team, which now included officers from neighboring counties. "Washington is smart and well-trained," he informed them. "But he's also desperate. I've authorized officers to use all necessary force if he resists arrest. This man assaulted 2 of our own, and we will show him what happens when you attack the blue line." The message was clear, if unspoken: shoot to kill. As darkness fell on the first day of the manhunt, search teams had covered much of Oak Ridge and the immediate surroundings, but found no trace of Marcus. Unknown to them, he had hiked 5 miles through dense forest that afternoon, using all his counter-tracking techniques to ensure he left no trail, eventually reaching a small stream where he refilled his water bottles and washed away any scent that dogs might follow. The night was clear and cool as he made his way back to the cabin by a different route, navigating by the stars as he'd done in remote mountains halfway around the world. He was nearly back when he heard voices and froze. Ahead, flashlight beams cut through the darkness. A search team was approaching the cabin from the main trail. Moving silently through the underbrush, Marcus circled around until he could see them clearly, 4 officers' weapons drawn, preparing to enter the cabin. His instinct was to disappear deeper into the forest, but he needed the supplies in his backpack inside. He'd have to retrieve them before the officers discovered them. "Are you on the edge of your seat right now? Drop a comment with number 1 if you think Marcus is justified in defending his home against corrupt officers, or number 2 if you think he should have surrendered and trusted the legal system. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about justice and accountability. What would you do if you were Marcus, surrounded by a corrupt police force determined to frame you? Let's see how he navigates this dangerous situation. Dr. Alicia Thompson maintained her professional demeanor as 2 police officers waited in her office at Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital. Despite the churning anxiety in her stomach, her face revealed nothing of her inner turmoil. "Dr. Thompson," Officer Wilson began, "we understand you and Marcus Washington are friends. When was the last time you spoke with him?" Alicia regarded the officers coolly, her posture perfect in her crisp white coat. As the only black female surgeon in the hospital, she had long ago mastered the art of navigating hostile environments with grace. "I had dinner with Marcus 2 nights ago before all this happened. We occasionally meet as friends." Officer Rodriguez, sitting quietly beside Wilson, noticed how carefully Dr. Thompson chose her words. "Has he contacted you since the incident?" Wilson pressed, leaning forward. "No," Alicia answered truthfully. "I've been in surgery most of the day. My phone has been off." This was technically true, though she had tried calling Marcus when she first saw the news. "If he does reach out," Wilson said, sliding a card across her desk, "it would be in his best interest for you to let us know immediately. Washington is dangerous and needs to be brought in before anyone gets hurt." After the officers left, Alicia closed her office door and leaned against it, allowing herself a moment of weakness. She had known Marcus for only 6 months, but she recognized in him the same careful navigation of white spaces that she herself practiced daily. The idea that he would attack police officers without severe provocation seemed impossible. Her thoughts were interrupted by a text message from an unknown number. "Coffee shop on Elm. 20 minutes. Important information about M. Come alone." Alicia hesitated, then grabbed her purse. Whether it was a trap or genuine help, she needed to know. 20 minutes later, she sat in a corner booth at the small coffee shop, surprised to find Officer Rodriguez waiting for her. "I don't have much time," the Latina officer said quietly, sliding into the seat across from Alicia. "I'm supposed to be canvassing for information, but there's something wrong with this whole situation." Alicia remained cautious. "Why are you telling me this?" Rodriguez glanced around before answering. Because I joined the force to protect people, not to hunt down a man for defending his home. The official story doesn't add up. Brennan and Kavanaugh have had multiple complaints filed against them, all by Black or Latino residents, all mysteriously dismissed. She slid a folded piece of paper across the table. This is my personal number. If Washington contacts you, tell him I want to help. I think there's evidence that could clear him, but he needs to come forward carefully. Chief Harrison has authorized deadly force if he resists arrest. Alicia took the paper, still uncertain if she could trust this officer. Why should I believe you? Rodriguez met her gaze steadily. Because, like you, I know what it's like to be viewed with suspicion just because of how I look. And because I've been watching Brennan and Kavanaugh for months. They're dirty and everyone knows it, but nobody talks about it. Meanwhile, 30 miles outside of Oak Ridge, Marcus met with 3 men in a secluded roadside diner near the interstate. They sat in a corner booth, 4 ordinary-looking men that no one would look at twice yet. Collectively, they had over 60 years of Special Forces experience. Troy Daniels, Miguel Santana, and Keith Benjamin had all served with Marcus in Delta Force, forming an unbreakable bond through multiple high-risk operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, and classified locations they still couldn't discuss. Troy, a barrel-chested black man with close-cropped gray hair, spoke first. Colonel Wilson briefed us. We're here as long as you need us. Marcus nodded gratefully. I need surveillance on Brennan and Kavanaugh. They're dirty, but I need proof beyond just what happened at my house. I think they're involved in something bigger, and Harrison is protecting them. Miguel, lean and intense with watchful eyes that missed nothing, pulled out a laptop. Already on it. We've rented 3 separate Airbnbs under different names, paid cash, rotating vehicles every 12 hours, standard protocol. Keith, the youngest of the group, but with the technical expertise that had saved their lives multiple times in the field, added, I've been monitoring police band radio and their digital communications. They've expanded the search to a 20-mile radius around Oak Ridge. They're calling in K-9 units tomorrow. For the next hour, the 4 men developed a comprehensive strategy. Troy and Miguel would conduct surveillance on the 2 officers, documenting their movements and activities. Keith would focus on technical intelligence, including attempts to access police records. Marcus would remain hidden, coordinating their efforts while preparing his defense. One more thing, Marcus said as they prepared to leave. There's a doctor at Oak Ridge Memorial, Alicia Thompson. She might be at risk for being associated with me. I need someone to keep an eye on her, make sure she's safe. Troy nodded. I'll handle it personally. As Marcus's team began their operation, Officer Rodriguez was conducting her own investigation. After her meeting with Dr. Thompson, she returned to the station and requested access to the body camera footage from Officers Reeves and Donovan, who had responded to the scene at Marcus's home. The footage had been classified as part of an ongoing investigation, but as a patrol officer, she had legitimate reasons to review it for her canvassing duties. What she found confirmed her suspicions. The footage showed Brennan and Kavanaugh already handcuffed when Reeves and Donovan arrived, just as the initial 911 call had reported. But more interestingly, it showed Reeves finding a cell phone on the floor, presumably Washington's, and pocketing it without logging it as evidence. It also showed them discovering a bullet hole in the wall, which was mentioned nowhere in the official report. Most damning of all, the footage captured a brief exchange between the officers. Harrison's going to be pissed, Donovan had muttered. Clean it up, Reeves had responded. Standard procedure. Washington's word against theirs. The implications were clear. This wasn't just about a botched raid. This was a deliberate cover-up. Rodriguez copied the files to a secure drive, then carefully replaced everything as she'd found it. She would need more evidence before she could act. Across town, Chief Harrison sat in Mayor William Parker's office, facing the increasingly concerned city official. Parker, a silver-haired politician with mayoral ambitions beyond Oak Ridge, was visibly agitated. "This is a disaster, Richard," he said, pacing behind his desk. "We've got national news outlets picking up the story. Black veteran hunted after defending home from police break-in. That's the headline on CNN right now. Harrison scoffed. Liberal media. They always take the criminal's side. Parker stopped pacing to glare at his police chief. Were Brennan and Kavanaugh serving a warrant because their hospital statements say they were conducting a preliminary investigation based on an anonymous tip? That sounds suspiciously like an illegal search to me. They had reasonable suspicion, Harrison insisted. Washington has been interfering with arrests in the East Side neighborhood, questioning officers' actions. Brennan and Kavanaugh were building a case. Mayor Parker wasn't convinced. Find Washington. Bring him in alive. And for God's sake, make sure this doesn't blow up any bigger than it already has. The last thing we need is protesters in the streets and the Department of Justice breathing down our necks. What neither man knew was that Marcus's team was already building a comprehensive picture of police corruption in Oak Ridge. Through careful surveillance, Troy and Miguel had documented Brennan and Kavanaugh meeting with known drug dealers in a remote area outside town, exchanging what appeared to be money for protection. Keith had managed to access partial records showing a pattern of evidence discrepancies in cases handled by the two officers, primarily involving Black and Latino suspects. Most disturbing of all was the emerging pattern Officer Rodriguez had independently discovered: a systematic targeting of Black residents in Oak Ridge. Traffic stops of Black drivers were 3 times higher than those of white drivers. Arrests of Black citizens for minor offenses like loitering or disturbing the peace were 5 times higher, and use of force incidents showed an even more dramatic disparity. As this evidence mounted, community leaders in Oak Ridge began questioning the official narrative about Marcus Washington. Pastor James Mitchell of First Baptist Church, a respected voice in the Black community, spoke out at a hastily organized press conference. We know Marcus Washington as a mentor to our youth, a decorated veteran who serves this community. The story being told about him doesn't match the man we know. We demand transparency and accountability from our police department. Chief Harrison dismissed these concerns publicly, but privately he was growing concerned. The manhunt had entered its 3rd day with no sign of Washington. The officers involved in the original incident, Brennan and Kavanaugh, had been released from the hospital but placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation, a move designed to appease public concern rather than address actual misconduct. Unknown to Harrison, the 2 officers had recognized their precarious position and were making plans of their own. "We need to find Washington before anyone else does," Kavanaugh told Brennan as they sat in Kavanaugh's apartment away from the department's ears. "If he goes public with that security footage, we're done." Brennan, still nursing his bruised ribs, looked sick. "This has gone too far, Tom. Breaking and entering, planting evidence now. What murder—" Kavanaugh's cold eyes narrowed. "It's him or us at this point. Harrison can only protect us so far. If Washington talks, we're looking at federal charges." Outside, in an unmarked car, Troy Daniels photographed everyone entering and leaving Kavanaugh's apartment building, while Miguel used a parabolic microphone to capture what conversations he could. The net was tightening around the corrupt officers, but they were growing desperate. And desperate men, as Marcus knew all too well from his combat experience, were capable of extreme measures. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake Oak Ridge to its foundations. The 4th day of the manhunt dawned with an unexpected development that sent shockwaves through the Oak Ridge Police Department. An anonymous email arrived simultaneously at the inboxes of every major news outlet in the region, containing an audio file and a brief message: "Officers Brennan and Kavanaugh discussing illegal activities. Recorded yesterday." The audio, crystal clear despite being recorded at a distance, captured the 2 officers in a damning conversation about planting evidence, stealing cash from suspects, and specifically targeting Black residents for harassment. The recording ended with Kavanaugh's chilling statement about finding Marcus Washington: "It's him or us at this point." Within hours, the recording was playing on every local news channel. Keith Benjamin, monitoring the situation from his temporary command center in an Airbnb rental, sent an encrypted message to Marcus: "Phase 1 complete. Media engaged. police department in chaos. Marcus received the message at a new location, a small fishing cabin on the far side of Lake Morrison, 15 miles from Oak Ridge. He had moved twice since the initial manhunt began, using all his evasion techniques to leave no trail. The cabin belonged to a veteran friend of Colonel Wilson who had arranged access without questions. Marcus's response was brief: "Proceed with Phase 2. Their plan was unfolding perfectly. Using the media to apply public pressure was just the beginning. Now they would escalate, systematically exposing the corruption while gradually tightening the noose around the truly guilty parties. At the Oak Ridge Police Department, Chief Harrison's emergency meeting with his command staff was interrupted by the arrival of two stern-faced FBI agents. "Chief Harrison," the female agent said, flashing her credentials. "I'm Special Agent Lisa Carver. This is Special Agent Marcus Dawson. We're here regarding potential civil rights violations by members of your department." Harrison's face flushed with anger. "This is a local police matter. We have a fugitive situation that we're handling internally." Agent Dawson, a tall black man with an impassive expression, responded coolly. "The audio recording released this morning suggests otherwise. Add in the military status of the alleged victim, and this falls squarely under federal jurisdiction. We'll need access to all your files related to Officers Brennan and Kavanaugh, as well as the Washington case." Before Harrison could protest further, Mayor Parker appeared in the doorway. "Give them whatever they need, Richard." He ordered, his political instincts telling him which way the wind was blowing. The city of Oak Ridge has nothing to hide and will cooperate fully with the federal investigation. While this confrontation unfolded, Officer Rodriguez was making a discovery of her own. Assigned to clerical duty as punishment for asking too many questions about the Washington case, she had been reviewing body camera archives when she found a pattern. Over the past year, Brennan and Kavanaugh had repeatedly forgotten to activate their cameras during arrests of black suspects who later filed complaints about excessive force or planted evidence. More damning still, she discovered that Chief Harrison had personally dismissed each complaint without investigation. With trembling hands, she copied the relevant files to a secure drive. This was career-ending evidence, the kind that would make her a pariah in law enforcement circles. But it was also the right thing to do. Across town, Dr. Alicia Thompson was finishing her shift when she noticed a police cruiser parked across from the hospital entrance. The same cruiser had been there yesterday and the day before. She was being watched. As she walked to her car, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're being followed. Don't go home. Go to the West Entrance gray Ford pickup." Hesitating only briefly, Alicia changed direction, her heart pounding. At the West Entrance, she found the truck engine running. The driver, a powerfully built black man she didn't recognize, rolled down the window. "Dr. Thompson, I'm Troy Daniels, friend of Marcus. We need to move you to safety." Alicia glanced back at the hospital, then at the police cruiser now pulling around toward her location. "How do I know I can trust you?" Troy reached into his pocket and pulled out a photo of himself with Marcus in military uniform. "Marcus said to tell you, Kandahar means trust. He said you'd understand." The reference to their dinner conversation, where Marcus had shared stories of his time in Afghanistan, convinced her. She climbed into the truck just as the police cruiser came into view. Troy accelerated smoothly, turning onto a side street before the officers could identify them. 20 minutes later, after a series of evasive maneuvers to ensure they weren't followed, Troy brought Alicia to a small cabin by the lake where Marcus was waiting. Their reunion was brief but emotional, both of them aware of the dangers still surrounding them. "They were watching your house," Marcus explained. "Brennan and Kavanaugh are getting desperate. The audio recording this morning has them cornered, and they know you're connected to me." Alicia nodded, processing this information. "There's an FBI investigation now. It's all over the news." "Colonel Wilson's doing," Marcus confirmed. "But we need more evidence of the broader corruption. That's where you come in." He explained how her access to hospital records could provide documentation of injuries sustained by people in police custody, establishing a pattern of abuse that went beyond just two corrupt officers. "It's risky," he acknowledged. "You'd be putting your career on the line." Alicia's response was immediate. "These men broke into your home and tried to frame you. They've been terrorizing our community for years. Whatever you need, I'm in." As night fell, Marcus received another encrypted message, this time from Miguel. "Target's on the move, heading to Washington's house with unmarked vehicle. Appears to be planting something." Marcus showed the message to Troy, who had returned after delivering Alicia to the secure location where Keith was set up. "They're getting desperate," Troy observed. "Setting a trap for when you return home." Marcus nodded grimly. "Or destroying evidence they missed the first time." He made a quick decision. "Tell Miguel to maintain surveillance, but don't intervene. We need to document everything they do." Meanwhile, Officer Rodriguez had made contact with the FBI agents, discreetly passing them the evidence she had gathered. "This goes beyond Brennan and Kavanaugh," she explained. "Chief Harrison has been systematically protecting officers who target black residents. It's a department-wide culture." Agent Carver reviewed the files, her expression grave. "This is exactly what we needed. Are you prepared to make an official statement?" Rodriguez straightened her shoulders. "Yes. It's time someone stood up for what's right." The next morning brought another bombshell. Local and national news outlets reported that an anonymous source had created a website containing security footage from Marcus Washington's home, clearly showing officers Brennan and Kavanaugh breaking in without a warrant, stealing money, and planning to plant evidence. The footage also captured the moment when Marcus identified himself as the homeowner and was attacked without provocation. Public opinion, already beginning to question the police narrative, shifted dramatically. Social media exploded with calls for justice for Marcus Washington and accountability for the Oak Ridge Police Department. Mayor Parker, seeing which way the political winds were blowing, called a press conference. "I have ordered an immediate independent investigation into these allegations," he announced, distancing himself from Chief Harrison. "If any officers have violated their oath or broken the law, they will be held accountable." Chief Harrison watched the press conference on the television in his office, his face a mask of fury. When it ended, he picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Find Washington," he ordered. "This ends now." What he didn't know was that his phone call was being recorded by Keith's sophisticated surveillance equipment, adding one more piece of evidence to the growing case against him. Brennan and Kavanaugh, now suspended pending investigation, but free on administrative leave, went into hiding, using a remote hunting cabin owned by Kavanaugh's cousin. They were armed and increasingly unstable, their partnership fracturing under the pressure. "We should just run," Brennan suggested, his face haggard from stress and lack of sleep. "Cross the border into Canada, disappear." Kavanaugh's response was cold. "We're not running. Washington is the problem. We eliminate him. It becomes his word against ours again. The recordings and footage could have been doctored." Brennan stared at his partner in disbelief. "Are you insane? You're talking about murdering a decorated veteran? It's over, Tom. We're done." The argument escalated until Kavanaugh stormed out, taking their only vehicle. Brennan sat in the cabin, a broken man contemplating the ruins of his career and freedom, all because he had allowed himself to be corrupted by a partner who had seemed so confident, so untouchable. Unknown to either officer, Miguel Santana had tracked them to the cabin and was monitoring their every move, reporting back to Marcus and the team. The chessboard was set with pieces moving into their final positions. Marcus's counteroffensive was working perfectly systematically, exposing the corruption while keeping him safely hidden. But as any combat veteran knows, no plan survives contact with the enemy, and Kavanaugh, now operating alone and with nothing left to lose, was about to throw the entire operation into chaos. The turning point came unexpectedly on the 7th day of the manhunt. Marcus and his team had established a secure website containing all the evidence they had gathered, the security footage from his home audio recordings of Brennan and Kavanaugh, discussing illegal activities, documentation of the pattern of civil rights violations throughout the department, and medical records provided by Dr. Thompson showing suspicious injuries to black detainees. The website went live at midnight, its address distributed simultaneously to media outlets, civil rights organizations, and law enforcement agencies at the state and federal levels. By dawn, it had gone viral, with news networks running continuous coverage of what was now being called the Oak Ridge police scandal. Chief Harrison arrived at the station to find FBI agents executing a search warrant, seizing computers and files related to Brennan Kavanaugh, and dozens of questionable arrests over the past 3 years. When he attempted to protest, Agent Carver handed him a document. "This is a notice that you are under investigation for conspiracy to violate civil rights under color of law. I suggest you contact an attorney." Harrison's face turned an alarming shade of red as he realized the extent of the trap that had closed around him. Inside the station, Officer Rodriguez was clearing out her desk, having been suspended by Harrison in his last official act before being escorted from the building. As she packed her belongings, officers she had worked with for years passed by without making eye contact, already treating her as a traitor for cooperating with the FBI. Only a few, mostly younger officers and those from minority backgrounds, quietly expressed support. "You did the right thing," Officer Chen told her, quickly moving on before others noticed their interaction. Rodriguez had just finished packing when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Need to meet. Information about B&K. Oak Ridge Park, 30 minutes. She hesitated, aware it could be a trap, but her instincts told her this was important. 20 minutes later, she sat on a bench in the nearly empty park, alert for any sign of danger. A man approached, and she recognized him immediately as Officer Wilson's younger brother, who worked in the department's evidence room. "They destroyed evidence," he said without preamble, sitting beside her, but not making eye contact, as if they were strangers having separate conversations. "Last night, Brennan and Kavanaugh came in with Harrison's authorization codes. They accessed the storage for Washington's case and removed items. I have the access logs showing they were there, but the security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned during that time window." Rodriguez kept her expression neutral, despite her racing heart. "Why are you telling me this?" The young man glanced around nervously. "Because my brother says you're one of the good ones, and because I've seen how they operate. It's not right." He slipped a USB drive onto the bench between them. "Access logs, inventory discrepancies, everything I could gather. I'm done being part of the problem." As he walked away, Rodriguez discreetly pocketed the drive, already planning to pass this new evidence to the FBI. Meanwhile, across town, Alicia Thompson was using her hospital credentials to access and compile medical records of individuals who had been treated for injuries while in police custody. The pattern was disturbing. Black and Latino detainees consistently showed injuries inconsistent with their arrest reports, often with multiple officers using the same phrases to justify use of force. He became combative, resisted restraint, fell while attempting to flee. Working methodically, Alicia documented case after case, building an irrefutable statistical pattern of abuse that spanned years. Her concentration was broken by a text from Marcus: "Possible compromise. Move to secondary location immediately." Alicia's heart raced as she quickly finished downloading the final files. Just as she was logging out of the system, the hospital's security chief appeared at her office door. "Dr. Thompson, there are police officers here asking about your accessing of patient records." Moving calmly despite her panic, Alicia gathered her things. "Tell them I'll be right out. I need to finish notes on a patient." The security chief nodded and left. Alicia immediately texted Troy, who was stationed nearby, as her security emergency exit plan now. She slipped the flash drive containing the records into her bra, then took a less traveled corridor to a service elevator that led to the hospital's loading dock. Troy was waiting in a delivery van, engine running. "Low profile," he advised as she climbed in. "We have reason to believe Kavanaugh is hunting for anyone connected to Marcus." While Alicia was being moved to safety, Marcus received disturbing news from Keith. "We've been compromised. Someone accessed our secure server. They know about the warehouse. The warehouse in question was an abandoned storage facility on the outskirts of town that Marcus's team had converted into their primary operations center. It contained their surveillance equipment, compiled evidence, and served as the hub for their counter-offensive against the corrupt officers. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, already moving to implement their emergency protocols. "Unknown," Keith replied, "but we need to assume immediate compromise. I'm wiping the servers and relocating essential equipment now." Marcus made a quick decision. "I'll meet you there. We need to recover the physical evidence before they find it." Despite the protests of his team, Marcus insisted on going personally. The warehouse contained items that could not be replaced, including original copies of evidence that would be crucial in any prosecution. Miguel volunteered to accompany him while Troy continued to ensure Alicia's safety. The warehouse appeared undisturbed when they arrived, but Marcus's combat instincts immediately sensed the trap. "2 vehicles behind the east loading bay," he whispered to Miguel. "Engine still warm on one." They adjusted their approach using the building's blind spots to advance unseen. Through a broken window, Marcus could make out 3 figures moving inside, searching systematically through the equipment and files his team had assembled. One was Kavanaugh, his service weapon drawn. The other 2 appeared to be officers still loyal to Harrison, helping to destroy evidence that could implicate the entire department. "We need a distraction," Marcus told Miguel. Using techniques perfected in dozens of hostile extractions across the globe, they created a diversion at the far end of the warehouse. When the corrupt officers moved to investigate, Marcus and Miguel slipped inside, retrieved the most critical evidence, and were preparing to exit when disaster struck. One of the officers returned unexpectedly, spotting them among the shelving units. "Police, don't move," he shouted, raising his weapon. Years of combat training took over. Marcus dove for cover as the officer fired the bullet, striking a metal cabinet beside him. Miguel returned fire with his legally owned handgun, not aiming to kill, but to provide covering fire as they retreated toward the exit. Kavanaugh and the other officer rushed back, and suddenly the warehouse erupted in gunfire. Marcus and Miguel moved with practiced coordination, using the cluttered environment for cover as they worked their way toward a side exit. They had almost reached safety when Miguel grunted in pain, stumbling as a bullet grazed his shoulder. Marcus grabbed his friend, half carrying him the final distance to the exit and into their waiting vehicle. "I'm okay," Miguel insisted as they sped away, blood seeping through his fingers where he pressed them against the wound. "Flesh wound, but they'll report this as us shooting first. We need to get this evidence to the FBI immediately." Marcus drove precisely at the speed limit, taking an indirect route to their rendezvous point with Keith. His mind raced, evaluating their rapidly deteriorating situation. The physical confrontation had escalated their legal jeopardy exponentially. Even with all their evidence, they were now vulnerable to charges of assaulting police officers, regardless of the circumstances. What he didn't know was that the evidence they had just recovered would prove to be the linchpin in exposing not just individual corruption, but a systematic conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of Oak Ridge's government. As Miguel's wound was being treated at their safe house, Keith examined the contents of the files they had rescued. Among them was a ledger documenting payoffs to police officers from local drug dealers, protection money that had been flowing into the department for years. More damning still were records of Mayor Parker's knowledge of the arrangement, with notes about his percentage of the proceeds. "This isn't just about racist cops anymore," Keith observed grimly. "This is organized crime operating under the protection of law enforcement." Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "Which means they'll come at us with everything they have now. The only way out is forward full exposure." He reached for his secure phone to contact Colonel Wilson with an update. The FBI needed this evidence immediately before Kavanaugh and his allies could spin the warehouse shootout to their advantage. The race against time had entered its most dangerous phase, with the lives of Marcus and everyone helping him now hanging in the balance. If you've been following this story closely, I want to know your thoughts. Comment number 1. If you believe the entire police department should be investigated for systemic corruption, or comment number 2, if you think this is just about a few bad officers. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice being served. The evidence is mounting against these corrupt officers, but will Marcus be able to clear his name before Kavanaugh silences him permanently? Let's continue this incredible story. The warehouse shootout changed everything. Local news stations led with breaking reports of armed fugitive Marcus Washington and accomplice in gun battle with police, complete with helicopter footage of the warehouse surrounded by tactical units. Chief Harrison, despite being under investigation himself, seized the opportunity to reshape the narrative, holding an impromptu press conference from the steps of the police station. This is no longer about alleged misconduct. He declared his uniform immaculate despite the chaos around him. This is about a dangerous fugitive leading an armed group against law enforcement. Officer Kavanaugh narrowly escaped with his life after attempting to investigate suspicious activity at an abandoned warehouse. We now have confirmation that Washington is not acting alone, but has assembled a paramilitary group with unknown objectives. The theatrical performance might have worked a week earlier, but public sentiment had shifted dramatically. Social media exploded with skepticism, users pointing out the convenient timing of this alleged shootout, just as evidence of police corruption was gaining national attention. Civil rights activists who had been monitoring the situation organized an emergency protest outside City Hall, demanding federal intervention and an independent investigation. By noon, the crowd had swelled to over 500 people carrying signs reading, "Justice for Marcus Washington," and "End Police Corruption in Oak Ridge." Marcus watched these developments from a new safe house, a small apartment above a garage belonging to a veteran friend of Colonel Wilson's. His team had separated after the warehouse incident, each moving to different locations to minimize risk. Miguel's wound had been treated by a discreet doctor in Colonel Wilson's network, another veteran who asked no questions. The evidence they had recovered was already in the hands of FBI agents Carver and Dawson, delivered through a secure channel established by Wilson. "They're desperate," Troy observed, watching the news coverage on a laptop. "Harrison knows he's finished if this goes to trial. He's trying to create enough chaos to justify extreme measures." Marcus nodded, his expression grim. "Which makes them more dangerous than ever. We need to get Officer Rodriguez and Dr. Thompson to absolute safety. They're the most vulnerable civilian witnesses." As if summoned by his concern, Marcus's secure phone buzzed with a message from Keith. "R is safe. FBI protective custody. T still with me. Signal when ready for extraction." One vulnerability addressed at least. The next step was making their evidence public in a way that couldn't be dismissed or covered up. Working through secure channels, Marcus's team had been in contact with journalists from the Washington Post and ProPublica, providing them with copies of their evidence against the Oak Ridge Police Department. The resulting investigative article, published simultaneously on both outlets' websites that afternoon, was devastating in its detail and precision. Titled, "Above the Law: How a Small-Town Police Department Terrorized Black Residents with Impunity." The piece laid out the systematic pattern of civil rights violations, complete with statistical analysis, victim testimonials, and excerpts from the incriminating audio and video recordings. Within hours, the article was being discussed on national news networks, with political commentators from across the spectrum calling for federal intervention. In Washington, D.C., the Attorney General announced that the Department of Justice was launching a pattern or practice investigation into the Oak Ridge Police Department. Back in Oak Ridge, Mayor Parker was frantically distancing himself from Chief Harrison and the implicated officers, announcing their immediate suspension pending the federal investigation. "The city of Oak Ridge has zero tolerance for misconduct or discrimination," he declared, conveniently forgetting his earlier support for Harrison's methods. "We welcome the Department of Justice investigation and will cooperate fully to ensure justice is served." What Parker didn't know was that the second phase of the exposé, scheduled for release the following morning, would implicate him directly in the corruption scheme based on the ledger recovered from the warehouse. For Marcus and his team, the tide was clearly turning, But the most dangerous moment in any operation is often when the enemy realizes they have nothing left to lose. Officer Brennan, isolated in Kavanaugh's cousin's cabin and increasingly desperate, made a decision that would alter the course of events. Using a burner phone, he contacted FBI agent Dawson. "I want to make a deal," he said without preamble. "Full testimony against Harrison Kavanaugh and the mayor in exchange for reduced charges and witness protection." Agent Dawson, professional but cautious, arranged a secure meeting for later that day. Brennan never made it. His vehicle was found at the bottom of a ravine off Highway 16, his body inside with a single gunshot wound to the head. The official report would call it suicide, but Marcus and his team recognized the signature of a professional elimination. Kavanaugh was tying up loose ends. This development added new urgency to their mission. If Kavanaugh was willing to murder a fellow officer to protect himself, no one connected to the case was safe. Marcus made a calculated decision to come out of hiding, but on his own terms. Using Colonel Wilson's connections, he arranged for a live interview with a respected national news anchor conducted from a secure location with his face visible but his position untraceable. "I am not the criminal here," he stated calmly, his military bearing evident even through the camera. "I am a decorated veteran who defended my home from an illegal invasion by corrupt officers." What followed was a systematic attempt to cover up not just this incident, but years of police misconduct targeting black residents of Oak Ridge. He detailed his allegations with military precision, referring to specific evidence that had been published in the investigative reports. "I am willing to surrender myself to federal authorities, not local police, to face any legitimate charges. But Officer Kavanaugh remains at large, armed and dangerous, having likely murdered his own partner to silence him." The interview was a sensation with the hashtag #IStandWithMarcus, trending nationwide within hours. Civil rights organizations rallied to his cause, offering legal representation and support. Even more significant was the response from veterans groups across the country, outraged at the treatment of a decorated Delta Force operator who had served his country with distinction. The pressure on local authorities became unbearable. Mayor Parker, desperate to save his own position, threw Chief Harrison under the bus in a hastily arranged press conference. "I had no knowledge of the extent of misconduct within the police department," he claimed, sweating visibly under the harsh lights. "Chief Harrison assured me that all operations were being conducted according to proper procedures." Harrison, watching from his home where he was serving his suspension, knew his career was over, but unlike Kavanaugh, he wasn't willing to cross the line into murder to save himself. That evening he contacted Agent Carver, offering his full cooperation in exchange for consideration in charging. His testimony would prove crucial in the events that followed. Officer Kavanaugh had disappeared. His police vehicle found abandoned near the state line. FBI bulletins described him as armed and extremely dangerous, likely suffering from acute stress and potentially delusional. What they didn't know was that Kavanaugh had no intention of running. He had gone to ground in Oak Ridge itself, staying in the basement of a sympathetic retired officer, planning his revenge against the man he blamed for destroying his life, Marcus Washington. As the 8th day of the crisis dawned, Marcus received an encrypted message from an unexpected source, Officer Rodriguez. "K sighted near Memorial Hospital. Appears to be watching for TFBI notified but delayed response. Advise caution." The implications were clear and terrifying. Kavanaugh was hunting Alicia Thompson either to eliminate a key witness or to use her as leverage against Marcus. With Troy escorting a group of journalists to document evidence at a secondary location and Keith coordinating with the FBI, Marcus made a decision that went against all tactical wisdom but aligned with his core values. He would not allow another person to be harmed because of him. Alone, armed only with his training and a legally registered handgun, Marcus Washington headed toward Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital, walking willingly into what he strongly suspected was a trap. The manhunt had come full circle, but this time the hunter and the hunted had exchanged roles. Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital buzzed with its usual weekday activity medical staff, moving purposefully through corridors, visitors coming and going, all oblivious to the deadly game of cat and mouse unfolding in their midst. Marcus entered through the main entrance, baseball cap pulled low, sunglasses concealing his eyes despite the indoor setting. His military training allowed him to blend in, despite his distinctive height and build, just another visitor, moving with purpose but not urgency. He had received updated intelligence from Keith Alicia was performing emergency surgery on the 3rd floor, due to finish within the hour. Hospital security had been quietly alerted to Kavanaugh's possible presence by the FBI, but in the sprawling facility with multiple entrances and exits, it would be nearly impossible to secure every approach. Marcus's plan was simple: reach Alicia before Kavanaugh did get her to safety, then deal with the rogue officer using the FBI team that was en route. It was the logical, prudent approach. But as he rounded a corner near the surgical wing, all plans evaporated at the sight of Officer Thomas Kavanaugh in hospital scrubs, surgical mask hanging loose around his neck, standing outside the operating room doors. Their eyes met across the corridor, mutual recognition instantaneous. For a suspended moment, neither man moved, predators assessing each other before the inevitable clash. Then Kavanaugh's hand moved toward the bulge under his scrub top, and the crowded hospital corridor erupted into chaos. "Gun!" Marcus shouted, diving sideways as Kavanaugh drew his weapon. Civilians screamed and dropped to the floor or ran in panic as the first shot rang out, the bullet embedding itself in the wall where Marcus had been standing a split second earlier. Rolling behind a supply cart, Marcus assessed his options, acutely aware of the bystanders still scrambling for cover. A direct firefight in a hospital was unthinkable, regardless of the threat Kavanaugh posed. He needed to draw the danger away from innocents. "Kavanaugh," he called out, "this is between you and me. Let's take it somewhere else." The corrupt officer's response was another shot that splintered the cart inches from Marcus's head. "There's nowhere to run, Washington," Kavanaugh snarled, advancing steadily. "You've ruined everything. My career. My life. I'm going to finish this right here." Marcus could hear approaching security undoubtedly responding to the gunshots. In minutes, the corridor would be flooded with armed personnel unable to distinguish friend from foe. He needed to end this now. Grabbing a metal bedpan from the cart, he hurled it down the corridor away from himself, the clattering noise momentarily distracting Kavanaugh. In that split second, Marcus charged, closing the distance between them with explosive speed. Kavanaugh fired wildly, but Marcus was already inside his guard, driving a precision strike to the officer's gun arm. The weapon clattered to the floor as Kavanaugh howled in pain, but he was no amateur in combat. He countered with a vicious knee strike that caught Marcus in the ribs, then followed with an elbow to the face that sent him staggering back. What followed was a brutal close-quarters battle between two highly trained fighters, one with military special forces experience, the other with years of street combat and police tactical training. They crashed through doors into a vacant patient room, grappling for advantage, each landing punishing blows that would have incapacitated lesser opponents. Kavanaugh fought with the desperation of a man with nothing to lose, his technique degrading into savage fury as his rational mind gave way to pure hatred. Marcus, despite his superior training, found himself on the defensive, conscious of the need to subdue rather than kill, to capture rather than eliminate. "You should have stayed in your place." Kavanaugh spat blood streaming from a cut above his eye where Marcus had landed a solid strike. "You people always push until someone puts you down." The naked racism in the statement only confirmed everything Marcus had been fighting against. "My place," he replied, circling cautiously. "My place was in Delta Force, serving this country while you were bullying citizens you swore to protect." Kavanaugh charged again, and this time Marcus used the officer's momentum against him, executing a perfect hip throw that sent Kavanaugh crashing into medical equipment. Before Marcus could press his advantage, the door burst open and two hospital security guards entered, weapons drawn. "Freeze, both of you." The distraction was all Kavanaugh needed. He grabbed a nearby fire extinguisher and discharged it directly at the guards and Marcus, filling the room with chemical fog. By the time it cleared, Kavanaugh had vanished, leaving behind one of the guards' weapons that he had seized in the confusion. Marcus quickly identified himself to the remaining guard. "I'm Marcus Washington. That was Officer Kavanaugh, wanted by the FBI. He's armed and in the hospital. We need to evacuate this floor immediately." The guard, recognizing Marcus from the news coverage, made a split-second decision to trust him, radioing for backup and evacuation protocols. Within minutes, alarms were sounding throughout the hospital, staff implementing well-rehearsed procedures to move patients to safety. But Marcus knew Kavanaugh wouldn't flee, not when his target was still in the building. With cold certainty, he realized where the corrupt officer was headed: the operating room. Alicia. Moving against the flow of evacuating personnel, Marcus raced back toward the surgical wing, arriving just as Alicia emerged, still in her surgical gown, looking confused by the evacuation order. Their eyes met across the corridor, recognition and relief washing over her face, quickly replaced by horror as she looked past him. Marcus spun, but too late. Kavanaugh stood at the end of the hallway, the stolen security weapon aimed not at Marcus, but at Alicia. "Don't move, Washington," he called, his voice eerily calm now, as if he had passed through rage into something colder and more calculating. "Or the good doctor dies first." Marcus raised his hands slowly, mind racing through tactical options, each more desperate than the last. "Thomas," he said, using the officer's first name, deliberately trying to re-establish him as a person rather than just a threat. "You know this can only end one way. The FBI is already here. The building is surrounded, but you can still walk out alive if you surrender now." Kavanaugh laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. "Walk out to what prison disgrace? My life is over no matter what happens here. But I can still make you pay for what you've done." He gestured with the gun. "Both of you move. We're going to the basement. If anyone tries to stop us, the doctor dies first, then you." With no choice that wouldn't endanger Alicia, Marcus complied, moving slowly down the corridor, with her beside him, Kavanaugh following at a safe distance. They descended via a service stairwell, emerging into the hospital's basement level, a maze of maintenance corridors, storage rooms, and mechanical systems. Kavanaugh directed them to a small boiler room relatively isolated from the main basement areas. "In there," he ordered, following them in and securing the door. Inside, he kept the gun trained on Alicia while addressing Marcus. "You think you're so superior, don't you? The decorated veteran, the righteous man. You have no idea what it's like policing animals who'd slit your throat for looking at them wrong." The naked racism in his statement made Alicia flinch, but Marcus maintained his calm, assessing the environment, noting potential weapons avenues of attack, calculating angles and distances with the precision drilled into him through years of combat training. "This isn't about policing, Thomas," he replied evenly. "This is about power and corruption, about targeting people because of their skin color, about breaking into homes without warrants and planting evidence." Kavanaugh's face twisted. "You deserved it. All of you do. Coming into our neighborhoods thinking you belong." Marcus shook his head, maintaining eye contact, keeping Kavanaugh's attention on him rather than Alicia. "Is that what you told yourself when you and Brennan were stealing drug money, when you were beating handcuffed suspects, when you murdered your partner to keep him quiet?" This last accusation struck home, Kavanaugh's composure cracking momentarily. "Brennan was weak," he snarled. "He would have sold us all out to save himself." "Like you're trying to do now," Marcus pressed, taking a calculated risk by antagonizing his captor. "Harrison is already cooperating with the FBI, Mayor Parker too. They're all saving themselves while you're here throwing your life away for nothing." It was psychological warfare attempting to break Kavanaugh's resolve, to introduce doubt and hesitation. For a moment it seemed to be working, confusion flickering across the officer's face. Then his expression hardened again. "Enough talking. On your knees, Washington. It's time to end this." As Marcus slowly knelt, hands still raised, Kavanaugh made his critical mistake. His attention shifted fully to Marcus, the gun moving from Alicia to center on his primary target. It was only for a second, but it was enough. Marcus exploded into motion, driving forward in a tackle that caught Kavanaugh mid-thigh. The gun discharged the bullet, passing harmlessly overhead as both men crashed to the floor. Alicia didn't hesitate, grabbing a fire extinguisher from the wall and bringing it down on Kavanaugh's gun hand with all her strength. The weapon skittered away as Kavanaugh howled in pain. What followed was a desperate struggle, Kavanaugh fighting with the frenzied strength of a cornered animal. Despite Marcus's superior training, the confined space limited his options, and Kavanaugh managed to land several punishing blows. Blood streamed from a cut on Marcus's forehead, partially blinding him as they grappled for dominance. Kavanaugh's hand closed around a wrench from a nearby tool cabinet, swinging it in a vicious arc that Marcus barely avoided. The moment of imbalance gave Marcus his opening. With lightning speed, he executed a precise strike to Kavanaugh's throat, not hard enough to crush the windpipe, but sufficient to temporarily paralyze his breathing. As Kavanaugh gasped and clutched at his neck, Marcus delivered a final decisive blow that sent the corrupt officer into unconsciousness. Breathing heavily, Marcus secured Kavanaugh with electrical cables from nearby maintenance equipment, then turned to Alicia. "Are you hurt?" he asked, wiping blood from his eyes. She shook her head, still gripping the fire extinguisher like a lifeline. "I'm okay, but you need medical attention." Before Marcus could respond, the door burst open, and FBI agents Carver and Dawson entered, weapons drawn, followed by a tactical team. "FBI, don't move." For a moment, tension hung in the frozen tableau. Marcus slowly raised his hands, his movements deliberately non-threatening. "Agent Carver," he said calmly, recognizing the lead FBI agent. "Officer Kavanaugh is restrained, but needs medical attention. Dr. Thompson is unharmed." Agent Carver assessed the scene quickly, noting the unconscious Kavanaugh, the makeshift restraints, and the discarded weapon. She lowered her gun slightly. "Marcus Washington, we've been looking for you." "I've been gathering evidence," Marcus replied evenly, "which I believe you've received through Colonel Wilson." Agent Dawson moved forward to check Kavanaugh's restraints and pulse. "He's alive. Get a medical team down here." He looked up at Marcus with newfound respect. "You could have killed him easily. Many would have given the circumstances." Marcus's expression remained stoic. "That's not who I am, and it's not what justice looks like." As FBI agents secured the scene and medical personnel attended to both Kavanaugh and Marcus's injuries, Agent Carver took preliminary statements from both Marcus and Alicia. "We'll need formal depositions later," she explained. "But for now, I can tell you that Officer Brennan's death has been reclassified as a homicide based on forensic evidence, and Chief Harrison has provided testimony implicating Mayor Parker in a protection scheme with local drug dealers." Marcus nodded, wincing as a paramedic cleaned the cut on his forehead. "The ledger we recovered from the warehouse should corroborate that." "It does," Carver confirmed, "along with electronic records we seized from the department servers. This goes beyond individual corruption, Mr. Washington. This is systemic." As they emerged from the hospital basement, Marcus was surprised to see a crowd gathered outside, held back by police barricades. News of the confrontation had spread rapidly, and journalists clamored for statements as Marcus was escorted to an FBI vehicle. More surprising was the composition of the crowd. Beyond the expected reporters and curious onlookers were dozens of community members, many holding signs supporting Marcus. "Justice for Washington," they chanted. "End police corruption." The tide had truly turned. In the aftermath of Kavanaugh's capture, events moved swiftly. Marcus was taken into federal custody, but treated as a cooperating witness rather than a suspect. The charges against him were reviewed by the U.S. Attorney's Office and eventually dropped with prosecutors citing clear evidence of self-defense and a pattern of police misconduct that justified his actions. The FBI investigation expanded with Agent Carver leading a task force examining civil rights violations throughout the Oak Ridge Police Department. What they uncovered shocked even the most cynical observers: a systematic targeting of black residents for harassment, evidence planting, and excessive force, all protected by Chief Harrison and tacitly approved by Mayor Parker in exchange for a percentage of seized assets and protection money from local criminal elements. The story dominated national news for weeks, becoming a focal point for discussions about police reform, systemic racism, and accountability in law enforcement. Through it all, Marcus Washington emerged as an unlikely symbol of resistance against corruption, his military background and discipline giving credibility to his account in circles that might otherwise have been skeptical. The community that had once viewed him with suspicion now rallied around him, his status as both a decorated veteran and a victim of racial profiling, bridging divides that had seemed insurmountable. 3 months after the dramatic confrontation at Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital, Marcus Washington sat in a crowded federal courtroom, his posture military straight, as he prepared to testify. The trial of former officers, Brennan and Kavanaugh, former Chief Harrison, and former Mayor Parker, had drawn national attention, with media outlets and civil rights organizations monitoring every development. The prosecution had built a formidable case, combining physical evidence, electronic records testimony from cooperating witnesses, and the extensive documentation Marcus and his team had assembled. As Marcus was called to the stand, he felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about his personal vindication, but about justice for an entire community that had suffered under corrupt leadership for years. "Mr. Washington," the federal prosecutor began after the preliminary questions, "could you describe for the court the events of the night officers Brennan and Kavanaugh entered your home?" Marcus spoke clearly and precisely, recounting the illegal entry, the discovery of his military background, and the subsequent attack when he identified himself as the homeowner. His testimony was compelling, not just for its content, but for his delivery, measured, factual, without embellishment or emotional flourish. The cross-examination was aggressive, with defense attorneys attempting to portray him as anti-police and suggesting he had used excessive force against the officers. Marcus remained unflappable, responding to each question with the same calm precision. "No, sir." He replied to one particularly leading question. "I did not attack the officers because of any animosity toward police. I defended myself against an illegal home invasion by individuals who had demonstrated hostile intent. My military training taught me to neutralize threats with minimum necessary force, which is exactly what I did." His testimony lasted nearly 6 hours over 2 days, but it was only one part of a comprehensive case that included Officer Rodriguez, detailing the department's internal corruption, Dr. Thompson presenting statistical evidence of discriminatory treatment of black patients with police-related injuries, and perhaps most damaging, former Chief Harrison, testifying against his co-conspirators in exchange for sentencing considerations. The trial concluded after 3 weeks with guilty verdicts across the board. Kavanaugh received the harshest sentence, 30 years, for multiple civil rights violations, conspiracy, attempted murder, and the murder of Officer Brennan. Harrison was sentenced to 15 years for his role in the conspiracy and cover-up. Mayor Parker received 12 years for corruption, conspiracy, and misuse of public office. The verdicts sent shockwaves through law enforcement communities nationwide, serving notice that the blue wall of silence could no longer protect those who abused their authority. In Oak Ridge itself, the aftermath brought sweeping changes. The entire command structure of the police department was replaced with state authorities overseeing a complete reorganization. Mayor Parker's resignation triggered a special election, resulting in the city's first black mayor, a retired judge with a reputation for integrity and community engagement. Most significantly, a civilian oversight board was established with real authority to investigate complaints against officers, review body camera footage, and recommend disciplinary action. Officer Rodriguez, reinstated with honors after the trial, was promoted to lead a new division focused on community relations and accountability. Her first official act was to recruit fellow officers committed to reform, creating a core group dedicated to rebuilding trust between the department and the communities it served. "This isn't about punishing police," she explained at a community forum 6 months after the trial. "It's about ensuring that we fulfill our oath to protect and serve everyone equally regardless of race, background, or neighborhood." Marcus found his own path forward as well. Using his settlement from a civil rights lawsuit against the city, he established a community center in the predominantly black East Side neighborhood, focusing on youth mentorship, conflict resolution, and building positive relationships with law enforcement. The center quickly became a model for similar programs across the country, with Marcus traveling to speak about his experiences and the importance of both accountability and reconciliation. His journey had changed him profoundly. The hypervigilance that had characterized his early days in Oak Ridge had softened, though it would never entirely disappear. The trauma of being hunted by those sworn to protect him had left scars manifesting in occasional nightmares and moments of heightened alertness that his therapist identified as PTSD, compounding the trauma from his military service. "You've experienced things most people can't imagine," Dr. Landon, his therapist, told him during one session. "In combat and here at home, it's natural that it affects you. The important thing is that you're addressing it rather than letting it define you." Marcus nodded, reflecting on the paradox of his situation. "In Afghanistan, I always knew who the enemy was. Here the threat came from the very people I was supposed to trust for protection. That's a different kind of battlefield." Yet amidst the trauma and recovery, unexpected blessings had emerged. His friendship with Alicia Thompson had deepened into something more, their shared experience during the crisis, creating a bond that transcended ordinary relationships. They moved slowly, both carrying wounds from their pasts, but with a mutual understanding that made words often unnecessary. On a crisp autumn day, 1 year after the events that had transformed Oak Ridge, Marcus hosted a reunion at his home. Troy, Miguel, and Keith had all returned, along with Colonel Wilson and several other veterans who had supported him during the crisis. They gathered in his backyard, sharing stories and memories, the camaraderie of shared service transcending their diverse backgrounds. "To justice," Miguel proposed a toast, his shoulder fully healed, though he still occasionally rubbed it when tired. "And to brotherhood," Troy added, raising his glass, "without which none of us would be here today." As the evening progressed, Marcus found a quiet moment with Colonel Wilson, the man whose trust and support had been crucial during the darkest days of the manhunt. "You know," Wilson said thoughtfully, "what happened here in Oak Ridge, it's not unique. Departments across the country have similar issues, some worse, some better hidden." Marcus nodded, having come to the same conclusion through his advocacy work. "The difference is whether people are willing to stand up and say enough is enough." Wilson studied him for a moment. "You've started something important here, not just exposing corruption, but showing a path forward. That's a different kind of service than what we did in Delta, but just as vital." Later that evening, after the guests had departed, Marcus stood on his back porch with Alicia watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. "Do you ever regret coming to Oak Ridge?" she asked, leaning against him. Marcus considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain and trauma," he finally answered, "but not the outcome, not the changes we've helped create." He gestured toward the town lights visible in the distance. "For the first time, people in every neighborhood can look at those police cars and feel protection rather than fear. That's worth everything we went through." The next morning, Marcus drove to the police academy, where he had been invited to address the newest class of recruits. Looking out at their young, earnest faces, diverse in a way the old department never had been, he felt a surge of cautious optimism. "Your badge is not a shield from accountability," he told them, his voice carrying the authority of his experiences. "It's a symbol of the trust placed in you by every citizen, regardless of their color or background. That trust is earned daily through your actions, your decisions, your commitment to justice for all." As he continued his address, Marcus recognized that true change would require more than one trial, more than one department overhaul. It would demand ongoing vigilance, continuous education, and the courage to speak truth to power whenever necessary. But looking at these new recruits, at Officer Rodriguez standing proudly at the back of the room at the community that had rallied for justice, he believed that change was not just possible, but inevitable. The path forward would not be easy or straight, but it was clearly marked for those willing to walk it. The measure of justice in a community, he concluded, is not in how it treats its most privileged members, but in how it protects the rights and dignity of its most vulnerable. Remember that every day you put on that uniform, and you will serve with honor. As the recruits rose in a standing ovation, Marcus Washington, once hunted as a fugitive in this very town, stood tall as a respected voice for justice and reconciliation, his journey from victim to advocate complete. What do you think about this story of justice prevailing against corruption? Has it changed how you view the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they serve? If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives about overcoming injustice. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right matters even when the odds seem overwhelming. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one man's fight for justice and accountability. Until next time, remember that positive change begins with courage and conviction. This powerful story teaches us that justice requires courage even when the system itself is corrupt. Marcus Washington's journey shows that standing up against racism and abuse of power is never easy, but always necessary. True heroism isn't just found on battlefields abroad, but in everyday acts of moral courage at home. The story reminds us that systemic racism can infect institutions meant to protect us, and that accountability is essential for healing communities. It demonstrates how evidence, persistence, and allies are crucial when fighting entrenched corruption. We see that one person's refusal to be victimized can spark wider change, creating ripples that transform entire communities. Perhaps most importantly, the story illustrates that real justice isn't about revenge, but about creating systems where everyone is treated with dignity regardless of their skin color. When Marcus chose restraint over vengeance, even toward those who had wronged him, he embodied the highest ideals of the justice he sought. His example reminds us that the path to meaningful change requires both exposing wrongdoing and building something better in its place. What experiences have you or someone you know had with racial profiling or police misconduct? Have you ever witnessed someone standing up against injustice like Marcus did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of courage against racism and corruption moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives of justice and resilience. Don't forget to share this video with friends who need to hear that standing up for what's right matters even when facing powerful opposition. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one man's fight against racist corruption. Remember, real change begins when ordinary people refuse to accept injustice as normal.